from a friend, from somebody who's here, part of our community. And many of you here are part of the Jewish community. We see Steve all the time. I know there's a pickleball contingent here as well. So we have a chance to hear firsthand a remarkable story. I don't need to upsell the story because you'll hear it now. But a remarkable story, firsthand story, of things that we read in the history books and things that are so important to the Jewish people, of course, but to humanity and to civilization. And it's a tremendous opportunity to hear this firsthand. So we're lucky today. And we'll hear Steve's personal, remarkable journey from where he came from to building a successful, a joyful life with a beautiful family. And we'll also hear about some of the people along the way who were ordinary people in terrible circumstances, and they faced what must have been a very difficult moral choice: to stand up for what they knew was right, or to give in to the pressure, or do what's easy, or procrastinate or answer away, and not really stand up for what was right. And we'll see some of the people that stood up for what was right and saved a life and saved a family. So it's really an honor to hear this firsthand. And with no further ado, I'll introduce a friend, Dr. Steve Felton, to please share with us your story.
Thank you, Rabbi, and thank you, Roxy, and thank you, Key Biscayne Community Center, which is a lovely place, which I really enjoy. So thank you all. So I was born in the Warsaw Ghetto in 1942. The Warsaw Ghetto was about just under 2 square miles in size. Perhaps a little bigger than Key Biscayne is. Now, Key Biscayne has a population of 15,000 people. The Warsaw Ghetto, at its peak, had a population of over 400,000 people. So the Warsaw Ghetto was put together by German Nazis in 1940, and it was fenced off, and all the Jews in Warsaw had to go and move into it. Obviously, that was not an easy situation. So, I'm going to tell you my story. I'm also going to tell you about this book. My mother didn't speak of the Holocaust a whole lot while I was growing up. And that was true with a lot of survivors. The Holocaust was so traumatic that they couldn't talk about it. But towards the end of her life, she put it down on paper. And I did some editing and put this into a book, which is called I Shall Lead You Through the Nights. And I will tell you my story, but I will also read a few parts of this book because of her ability to write was unbelievable. And I never knew she could really express herself that way in English, but she did. So I'm going to tell you my story, but my mother and I were the only survivors of a very large family. My father, my stepbrother, and the rest of the family were all killed by the Nazis. So I'm a very lucky guy. Here I am in beautiful Key Biscayne. And I attribute this to my mother's courage, her love, and also to a Polish Catholic family that we owe our lives to. So what I'm going to start first is I'm going to give you a little history of what happened as far as the Germans and what happened in Poland. The Germans invaded Poland in September of 1939. And took about a month before they fully occupied Warsaw. And they put together the ghetto in 1940. But before that was put together, there were many restrictions put on the Jewish population in Warsaw as soon as they arrived. Within about a month of their arrival, all Jews had to wear the yellow stars. And movements were restricted. And it got gradually worse until 1940, when the ghetto was put into place. All the Jews had to move into the ghetto, which was surrounded by a 10-foot high fence topped with barbed wire. And conditions in the ghetto were obviously very difficult. So what I'd like to do now is start to tell you the story of my family. My mother was born in a town called Mush, which was near Baranovich. And Mush was a small town, and my mother lived on a farm with a poppy seed mill, and her family was a happy family. She had 5 siblings. They observed the Sabbath. They had people over, strangers who were coming through town would come have dinner with them. It was just a beautiful existence, the way she describes it. When she decided she wanted to be a nurse, and she finally convinced her parents to allow her to go to Warsaw, which is miles away, to study nursing. And she was accepted to the St. Sophie's School of Nursing, which was in Warsaw. And it turned out she was the only Jewish nursing student at the school. She stayed with her Aunt Bella, who lived in Warsaw, and she graduated after 2 years. She made many friends, non-Jewish friends at the school, and she really loved it. She was very happy. Soon after she graduated, she met my father, Victor Feldstein, that was his name. Victor was a widower, and he had a 9-year-old son by the name of Stasio. And after 2 years, they were married. So they got married in 1938. So I'm going to read you, so after getting married, they got settled in Warsaw. My father was an industrialist, engineer. He also played the violin. He was quite successful in his work. He manufactured street lamps and other things. So what I want to read to you is a little part of the book. Okay. In August 1939, the 3 of us, Victor, our son Stasio, and I, went to the Baltic seashore to a summer resort of holo. We were troubled there when we heard news from Germany that was very disturbing. By the end of August, people had started to panic. Everyone was trying to get home. The trains were filled with people who could hardly stand. Stasio, our son, was squeezed between us. Back in Warsaw, Tasia, our housekeeper, was very happy to see us when we arrived home late in the evening, exhausted. We went straight to bed but could not sleep. The telephone rang from the moment we arrived until very late that night. Everyone was happy to hear our voices. Everybody was worried, and we could feel the war in the air. Jewish families had been chased out of Germany and poured into Poland. There was bitter news from all over. Next day, I sent a telegram to my parents to let them know that we were home. They called me. They were fine. It was good to hear their voices. If I had only known that this was the last time I would speak to them, I would have kept on talking forever. Why did God pick me to be the only survivor, the only witness to the massacre of my beautiful family? So, conditions in the ghetto worsened with time. And I'll read you another paragraph. This was a little bit later on. We all shared the kitchen and bathrooms, and everyone tried to be calm and helpful. Stasia still came to the ghetto to bring treats for Stasio. She was very devoted. She loved Stasio very much. Although visiting us became increasingly dangerous, we could not convince her to stop. The visits finally became impossible and she stopped coming. In the ghetto, I went out only in emergencies when you could not get a hold of a nurse or medic. It was very painful to see the hungry children sitting on the sidewalk with outstretched, bone-dry hands, begging for a piece of bread. When I gave them some food, they were so weak they could hardly hold the bread in their hands. Famous musicians played in the streets to earn some food. The winter of 1941 was harsh. Whole families wrapped in rags sat on the sidewalk, unable to move because their legs were frozen. So, obviously, as you know, the Nazis wanted to kill all the Jews who lived in Poland and elsewhere. And they did this in many different ways. Initially, it was basically going into the ghetto and shooting people wherever, for whatever reason. They also put together these squads called the Einsatzgruppen. These were squads of Germans and other nationalities, Ukrainians, and others. And the purpose of the Einsatzgruppen was to go out into the small towns in the countryside, find Jews and others that were not welcome in Germany anymore, and shoot them. So, and that was done to a very large degree, and a lot of Jewish people were killed in that fashion. In Warsaw, what was happening in Warsaw was what was called the roundups. And this was when, started in 1942. The Nazis would come in and round Jews up from their apartment buildings, or wherever they lived, or in the streets, march them to a train station, and put them in cattle cars and send them off to extermination camps in Treblinka, where they were gassed to death. So this was called the actions, that's what they called them. And the whole purpose was to kill Jews. Hitler wanted to exterminate every Jew he could find. The population of Warsaw was about, like I said, it was over 400,000 people. When these actions were started in 1942, basically thousands of people, up to 10,000 perhaps, were rounded up every day and sent to the extermination camps. So 75% of the Warsaw population died in that fashion. We're talking about 75% of over 400,000 people. Towards the end of 1942 and into 1943, there must have been about 50,000 Jews left in the ghetto, and they actually got together to form some resistance to the Germans. So there was an uprising in the Warsaw ghetto in April of 1943, which lasted for a month. They managed to hold back the German military for a whole month. So I'll tell you what happened while my mother was in the ghetto in 1941. This is before the actions, actually. Things were pretty miserable, but they got even worse. She had a visitor from Bush. This was a friend of the family, not Jewish, who came to the ghetto to give my mother some information. After the usual greetings, my mother asked him, well, how are my parents? Because she had no contact with them. And he told her that they were killed. It wasn't only her parents, it was also her brothers, her sisters. One of her sisters was married to somebody and had a child. The child was also killed. and her husband was killed. So my mother was, so shocked and depressed by this news, she actually took some pills to try to kill herself. But she didn't succeed. She woke up, they were basically sleeping pills. She woke up the next day. My father woke her up, actually. And he realized what happened. So he had a friend who was a psychologist who came and talked to my mother and said, Eva, you need to have something to live for. Sorry. So he said to her, you need to get pregnant. So that was in 1941. And she did get pregnant. And not 9 months, but 7 months later, I was born. So I was born 2 months premature, weighing 2.2 pounds. It was a terrible time to have a child. The ghetto was a miserable place to live. It was overcrowded. There was starvation. And but my mother had a tremendous amount of courage. At that time, when I was born, that's when the actions started. The Germans would come to the ghetto, the Nazis, the Germans, and they would empty out the apartment buildings or the residences, whatever it was, put people into the streets and march them to the train station. My mother obviously could not take me into the hiding places where people were hiding because I would cry. So she wouldn't do that. So what would she do? She would carry me downstairs into the street. And my mother spoke very excellent Polish. She had tremendous courage. And as a result, she got away with it. And I'll read you a paragraph about that. Okay. When I heard the SS screaming, "Run to her," meaning down, I rushed Stasio and the Mendelssohns up to the hiding place. Everyone else was at work. I could not hide with her because of baby Stefan. Might start to cry and betray our hiding place. So I put him on a white pillow, down pillow. This is how we carried babies in Poland. I went downstairs. I felt that all eyes were staring at me. My baby was 6 weeks old by then, and he weighed about 4 pounds. Stefan looked like a newborn. The SS officer was very polite, looked at me, but didn't bother to check my working permit. I was free to go. And this happened numerous times. And she has some close calls. One time she was actually picked to march to the train station, but somehow managed to get away. So, she was that kind of courageous person. So anyway, things only got much worse. To the extent that 9 months later, after I was born, in March of 1943, March 1st, my father managed to get my mother and I smuggled out of the ghetto. He and Stasio, my stepbrother, were gonna meet us afterwards. It was just too dangerous for all of us to be together. So my mother was smuggled out, money was paid, and she got false papers and another name, and she was taken to Poland's south, where the mountains are. And she was going to stay with a person who didn't know she was Jewish, but wanted somebody to live with her. And, my mother made out that she was the wife of a Russian officer on the front or something like that. And that lasted for a while, but not too long. You know, people would get suspicious. Poles were paid to turn in Jews. If they protected a Jew, they'd be killed. So it was natural for anybody coming in who was strange, for the neighbors and people in the village to question, who is that person? So that happened to her several times. And one time, she was actually taken into the Gestapo headquarters and viciously questioned as to whether she was Jewish. My mother had, you know, she had those false papers, but she also had a graduation certificate from the St. Sophia School of Nursing, which helped a lot. And she spoke perfect Polish, and I wasn't circumcised, which was a major thing because that's what they looked at. So she got away with it, let her go. But still things were very treacherous and other people would start to question her. So she decided, that's it, she has to get back to Warsaw to find my father, Victor, and Stachio. So she got on a train and managed to get back to Warsaw after a difficult trip. But she got back and she tried to find my father. She went back to the ghetto and the German guard there wouldn't let her in. The uprising had occurred or was occurring at the time, and she couldn't get in. She couldn't find out anything about my father at that time, or Stachio. So she didn't know what to do. And the person who was who was paid to smuggle her out, he didn't want to have anything to do with her because he was scared. Things were so difficult at that time. So she decided, she had a friend, a very good close friend who was not Jewish, who told her that if you ever have trouble in Warsaw, my father is a policeman. And his name is Stefan Matach. And you should look him up. So carrying me, and I was like, 9 months old, she went, and by the way, she had lost her papers, she had lost her money because she was robbed while she was in Warsaw. She had nothing at that point. No papers, no money. She was walking from precinct to precinct looking for Stefan Matach and finally found him. And Stefan Matach knew who she was, he was told. So he immediately took her to his home, and the family decided to take us in at great risk, obviously. We were sent from family member to family member because everywhere we were, there were questions being asked. So we were in Warsaw, we were in Lublin, we were in various parts of Poland with the same Matach family. The whole family was out to protect us. And I actually have some memories of that time. At that time I was approaching 2.5, something like that. And I remember, I have 2 images that stick in my mind. One is, I was walking with another boy, and this was in Lublin, and we walked into a shed, and we looked in the shed, and there were bodies lying on the floor, dead bodies with their eyes wide open. So that's one image that sticks in my mind. And the other thing I remember was playing with some boys, and having my pants pulled down to see if I was circumcised. So, anyway, we moved around from one family member to another, and my mother dyed her hair blonde. She was told a long time before that, when you, to look Polish, carry the baby in your left, with your left hand, so that when you pass a shrine, you can cross yourself. So she knew how to do that. So she passed as being a Polish woman, and she did that very well. And towards the end, in 1944, they moved her to another town called Baniocha, which is not far from Warsaw, where there was a German field hospital, and she stayed with one of the family members and worked as a nurse in the German field hospital, which was almost unbelievable. I'll show you some photos related to that. In 1945, the Russians liberated Poland and liberated Baniocha, where my mother was staying. So the war was over. The war was over. And, you think everybody was jumping for joy, some people did, but it was still very difficult. A lot of the Jewish people who had survived wanted to find their homes and what was left of them. And they weren't welcome, because whoever, they left their homes and other people moved in, the Poles didn't want them back. So things were really difficult, even after the war was over. And they were, Jews are still being killed for that one particular reason. So, my mother, eventually, she got a job in Warsaw for a short time. She eventually contacted a Jewish agency in Warsaw. She was trying to find out what happened to her husband, to my father. And finally she did find out. He and also my brother, my stepbrother, were in the uprising, and eventually they were killed in Auschwitz. So here she was, no family, just with me. She meets this other survivor at the agency, at this Jewish agency, by the name of David Wasserman. And they get together, and the agency sends everybody to Paris, because for some reason that's where they were sending people to live for a short time. In Paris, my mother and David get married. I remember that. I remember Paris, because in Paris, I was circumcised. But, so in Paris, the wedding took place, and eventually, in 1947, I came to this country with my stepfather and my mother. And I remember coming here. I remember arriving in the winter of 1947. It was a really terrible snowstorm. But I saw it, so we had to dock in the harbor in Gravesend Bay before we could dock. And I remember it was at nighttime, and you could see the lights of the cars on the Belt Parkway. And I remember seeing the Statue of Liberty, and which is what I have on the cover of this book. Because if you can imagine what it's like to go from terrible, terrible terror to freedom, it's an amazing feeling. And that's what I'm sure everybody felt when they saw the Statue of Liberty. So what I'd like to do now is show you some slides and photographs of the family, and tell you some more about what happened subsequently after arriving in this country. Let's see if I can work this properly. Okay, so this is my mother's family. My mother is the second row, the second from the left. And she's with her siblings, her parents. Her parents are first row on the right, number one and number two, and then a grandfather next to them. and her sisters and her sister's husband and child. So that's my mother's family. My father, Victor, this is his family, Victor Feldstein. And my father is the back row, the second from the right. The man on the back row to the left is my uncle Joe, who came to this country before the war and started a chemical business. They were a well-off family. They had a lot of, they were very significant in the Jewish community in Warsaw, to the extent that Moses Feldstein, my grandfather, was sitting over there on the right side. He was friends with Theodor Herzl, who was one of the founders of Zionism. Okay, this is my mother and I in 1943. So this is the Maltach family that protected us. I'm the little guy there. My mother is holding me, and next to me is Helenka, who was actually my babysitter throughout that period of time. And Stefan Maltach is the man standing next to my mother, the policeman. So my mother, this is towards the end of 1944, before the war was over. My mother working at the German field hospital, that's her, and that's my babysitter, Helenka, and I'm sitting with her because one of the doctors at the hospital took a liking to me. So he let us sit on his horse and gave me his military cap to wear. Obviously, he didn't know we were Jewish. That's another photo of my mother and I in 1945. And this is in Paris, where we were staying before we came to the States. And that's a photograph of my mother, my stepfather, David Wasserman, and me. They took a short honeymoon in Switzerland when they got married. And my mother had very strong feelings about the Jewish people. First of all, she wanted to get back at Hitler by showing him that he can't exterminate the Jewish people. And one way to get back is to come to the States, get married, have more children, create another family, which is what she did. So this is my mother came to the States with me and my stepfather, and they had 2 more children. So it's me, I'm on the left, and my sister and my half-sister, my half-brother on the right, Minna and Alan. So in 1989, we went to Poland, all of us. In fact, for this trip, it was together with my daughter Jane, who was here, right there. Jane went on this trip with us. So it was my mother, me, and Jane. So that's the policeman, Stefan Maltach, with his wife. And you ask, why did they risk their lives for us? I still don't have an answer. Obviously, they're good people, and I happen to think that most people are good. It's the bad ones that make the press. Okay, so this is my mother, my daughter Jane, Helenka Maltach, which is the babysitter, and Wojtek, who's actually one of the family members who was my friend. He was about my age. Okay, so this is my mother together with Stefan Maltach at the time. Now we went on that trip, and my mother wanted to go back to where her family lived in Mush, which is right near Baranovich. And so I want to show you that it's on a video, if I can get some. So I'm going to get some help showing the video. So my mother managed to get visa to go to Baranovich and Bush. Yeah.
Well, we never made it to Baranovich during our trip to Warsaw, except my mother finally did get to go there. She managed to get a visa from the Russian authorities and did go to Baranovich, which is, of course, where she was born and where her family grew up. She wanted to see what happened to her property and whether anybody knew what actually happened to her family. And these photographs are of her trip to Baranovich in May of 1989. When she arrived there, the initial reaction from the residents was one disbelief, because some of them actually recognized her, and the others didn't, just because she came back to retrieve property. But after she reassured them, they actually were cooperative and told her what happened to the Jews of Baranovich, including her family. They were taken to the woods and shot by the Germans. And the site is actually shown in this photograph. And when my mother was there, she looked and she unbelievably saw bones in the earth, which could have been the bones of her parents for all she knew. Anyway, it was a very, very moving trip for her.
So I'll show you some other slides. So my mother wanted to create the family. So this is my sister's family. My sister had 5 kids. So that's my sister up top, and my mother down sitting there with the children. And then on the other side of the family, you have Jane, who's here, and our son Jake, and anyway, it's Jesse and grandkids. So my mother achieved her goal. She wanted to have a family, and she got it. So what happened after that? We went on another trip to Poland and to Israel, and this was with a cantors group, and it was to explore the origins of cantori music. But in the process, we went to Auschwitz, we went to the extermination camp, to Birkenau, and we took stones from the where the ovens were that weren't totally destroyed. The Germans couldn't destroy them because there was such a hurry to get away from the Russians who were coming in. So they left the ovens still there. So I took stones from that location. We flew to Israel and put it on my mother's grave. My mother loved Israel so much that she was buried there. So let me show you some slides of that first. So this is our visit to Israel at my mother's grave. And we took those stones and put them right on the grave. That's a traditional thing that's done in Judaism to honor those who were dead. And it's just, my mother loved, like I said, she loved to have Jewish people have families, but she also loved Israel because she felt that Israel is a protection for Jewish people. Otherwise, genocide of Jewish people could happen again. But if there's an Israel, that may not happen. So she wanted to be buried there for that reason. That's my mother's gravesite. So on the trip to, on the same trip that I mentioned before, we went to the extermination camp near Auschwitz, and lit a candle. That's my son Jake, and that's me with the lighting the candle, and Barbara in the middle. Let me go back just a little bit. So I want to just mention that one of the other things we did, which was really important, was I contacted Yad Vashem, which is the Israeli Holocaust Museum, and they have something called, the Israeli government, together with Yad Vashem, has something called Righteous Gentiles. This was started in the 1950s, and it's to honor non-Jewish people who protect the Jewish people. And they truly investigate to see if it really happened. So I submitted the Martash family for investigation. And after a year, they approved it. And they designated the Martash family as righteous Gentiles. So this happens to be the ceremony where the Israeli ambassador is giving the honor to the Martash family. So this is my family that went to the ceremony and the Martash family all together. And it was just unbelievable to see that. And this is the designation, the plaque that's given to one of the Martash family members. That's me on the left and the Israeli ambassador on the right. And we went to Israel, and at the at Yad Vashem, the Israeli Holocaust Museum, they have a plaque that they put down for the righteous Gentiles. So you can see the Martash family listed over there. All right, so I need another video.
I got you.
Please, okay, so let me, I'm going to conclude with another video. And I just want to explain the video. This is, if my mother was such a Zionist because she felt Israel was so important, and I think she's right. If 80 plus years ago, the state of Israel existed, it wouldn't be a genocide. So one of the symbolic videos that I think is so important here is to the Israeli enforcement. It's hard to believe that 6 million Jews were killed because one individual was crazy enough and his proponents were crazy enough to do something like that. I don't get it. And I'm sure that, we try to learn from the past, but are we really learning? I don't know. I can't give you an answer on that. The reason I speak about this is because I personally experienced it, and I want you to know that I think the Martash family, who are not Jewish, obviously saved me. I'm here because of them. And it's not about Jews, Catholics, Protestants or whatever. It's about one powerful man who has a crazy idea and people follow him. And that's what happened then. I just hope it doesn't happen again. Thank you. Yeah, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Steve will take questions. First of all, a big thank you to Steve. And thank you to Roxy and the Community Center for hosting and for putting out a beautiful kosher spread and kosher wines and making this available. Like you always do to bring important events to the community. So thank you, and thank you everyone for coming. And Steve will be here to take questions.
I have a question. How did you get that picture of your mother's family? How did you get the picture of your mother's family?
My mother had that picture. I'm not sure how that happened, but she had I remember exactly what it looked like. It was like an attaché case made out of straw, something like that. And she had all these photographs in there. She's speaking here. Carolyn?
How old were you when you knew you were Jewish?
I can't hear you.
How old were you when you knew you were Jewish? I imagine it was important not to tell a child.
How old was I when I knew I was Jewish? When I got circumcised? That was a good reason not to. All right, well, thank you very much for attending this.